The first rays of dawn began to pierce through the dense canopy of Sao Paulo's towering skyscrapers, casting long shadows over the bustling city streets. As the city slowly awakened, the vibrant energy of urban life surged through every alleyway and boulevard. Street vendors set up their stalls, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the scent of grilled meats. The cacophony of honking cars, chattering pedestrians, and distant construction created a symphony unique to this sprawling metropolis. Amidst this dynamic backdrop, a solitary figure moved with purpose, blending seamlessly into the vibrant tapestry of the city's heartbeat. Lucas Andrade, a name whispered with reverence among the local art community, was an enigmatic presence in Sao Paulo's art scene. To the untrained eye, he might appear as just another young man navigating the crowded streets, but those who truly observed his work knew better. Lucas was the silent architect behind some of the most stunning and thought-provoking street art the city had ever seen. His murals, bursting with color and emotion, transformed mundane urban spaces into canvases of hope, resilience, and unspoken stories. As Lucas approached his chosen spot for the day, a secluded corner of Parque do Ibirapuera, his heart raced with a mix of excitement and determination. This particular morning was special. He was about to embark on his most ambitious project yet. The site he had selected was a large, blank wall that had long been neglected, its surface marred by years of graffiti and urban decay. To Lucas, it was a blank slate waiting to be imbued with life and meaning. He paused for a moment, taking in the surroundings. The park was a sanctuary amidst the chaos of the city, a place where nature and urban life coexisted in a delicate balance. The wall, with its rough texture and worn-out surface, stood as a silent testament to the passage of time and the stories it held. Lucas envisioned something extraordinary, an artwork that would not only beautify the space but also convey a powerful message of resilience and creativity in the face of adversity. Lucas unwrapped his set of brushes and a palette bursting with vivid colors, each one carefully selected to evoke specific emotions and themes. His movements were fluid and deliberate, each stroke of the brush a testament to his skill and passion. As he began to paint, the wall transformed under his touch. Bold reds symbolized passion and determination, while deep blues conveyed a sense of calm and introspection. Splashes of yellow and orange added warmth and optimism, creating a harmonious balance that drew the eye and captivated the heart. Passers-by couldn't help but stop and watch as the mural took shape. Children pointed in awe, their faces lighting up with wonder, while adults paused to appreciate the intricate details and the story unfolding before them. Lucas's work had a magnetic quality, an ability to draw people in and make them feel connected to the art on a deeply personal level. It wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about creating a space where emotions could be expressed and shared, where the struggles and triumphs of everyday life could find a voice. As the hours passed, Lucas lost himself in his work. The mural became an extension of his soul, each element meticulously crafted to reflect his journey and the collective experiences of the community. He painted figures that represented the everyday heroes of the city, the workers, the dreamers, the fighters, each one depicted with a sense of dignity and strength. These figures stood tall amidst the chaos, embodying the resilience and creativity that defined their lives. Despite the beauty of his creation, Lucas faced numerous challenges. The wall was not just a physical barrier, but also a symbol of the obstacles he had to overcome in his own life. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, Lucas had witnessed firsthand the struggles of his community, poverty, violence, and limited opportunities. These experiences had shaped his worldview and fueled his desire to use art as a means of transformation and empowerment. As a child, Lucas had found solace in drawing, a pastime that provided an escape from the harsh realities of his environment. His parents, though struggling to make ends meet, recognized his talent and encouraged his artistic pursuits. They scraped together what little they could to provide him with basic art supplies, fostering a sense of hope and possibility in his young heart. A pivotal moment came when his high school art teacher, Mrs. Oliveira, took notice of his potential and mentored him, offering guidance and inspiration that would set him on the path to becoming a street artist. Under Mrs. Oliveira's tutelage, Lucas honed his skills and developed a unique style that blended realism with abstract elements, creating pieces that were both visually striking and emotionally resonant. However, the journey was not without its hardships. Financial constraints often limited his access to high-quality materials, and societal expectations pressed him towards more conventional career paths. Yet, Lucas remained steadfast in his commitment to art, using every challenge as an opportunity to innovate and push the boundaries of his creativity. Discovering street art was a turning point in Lucas's life. It was an unconventional medium that allowed him to bring his art to the people, transforming public spaces into galleries that were accessible to everyone. The rawness and immediacy of street art resonated deeply with him, offering a platform to express not just his own story, but also the collective narrative of his community. Each mural became a dialogue between the artist and the audience, a conversation that transcended language and cultural barriers. His first foray into street painting was met with mixed reactions. Some admired his work, praising the bold colors and the emotive themes, while others criticized it as vandalism, a misguided attempt to impose his vision on public property. Undeterred by the criticism, Lucas persisted, driven by a belief in the transformative power of art. He sought out spaces that were neglected or overlooked, turning them into vibrant expressions of hope and resilience. As his reputation grew, so did his opportunities. Local businesses began to commission him for murals, recognizing the value his art brought to their establishments. Community centers and schools invited him to lead workshops, inspiring young artists to find their voices through painting. Lucas became a beacon of inspiration, a symbol of what could be achieved through passion and perseverance. His murals, each one more ambitious than the last, became landmarks in the city, drawing tourists and locals alike to witness the beauty and message they conveyed. However, success did not shield Lucas from the personal struggles that had shaped his journey. Financial instability remained a constant concern, and the demands of maintaining his artistic practice often led to sleepless nights and periods of intense stress. Balancing his creative ambitions with the practicalities of daily life was a delicate act, one that required immense discipline and resilience. There were times when doubt crept in, questioning whether his sacrifices were worth the fleeting moments of recognition and admiration. Despite these challenges, Lucas found strength in his community and the unwavering support of those who believed in his vision. Friends, family, and fellow artists formed a tight-knit network, offering encouragement and assistance when needed. Their collective support provided a foundation upon which Lucas could build, turning moments of vulnerability into opportunities for growth and collaboration. Together, they celebrated the triumphs and navigated the setbacks, fostering a sense of unity and shared purpose that fueled their creative endeavors. One of the most significant aspects of Lucas's work was its ability to address social issues and spark conversations within the community. His murals often depicted themes of unity, equality, and the struggle for a better future, challenging viewers to reflect on their own lives and the world around them. By highlighting the stories of marginalized individuals and communities, Lucas used his art as a catalyst for change, inspiring others to take action and make a difference. As the mural in Parque do Ibirapuera neared completion, Lucas felt a profound sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about the art itself, but the journey it represented, the countless hours of painting, the unwavering dedication, and the resilience required to bring his vision to life. The mural stood as a testament to his belief in the power of creativity to overcome adversity, a message that resonated deeply with all who witnessed it. The final stroke of the brush completed the masterpiece, a vibrant portrayal of hope and endurance that mirrored Lucas's own journey. He stepped back, surveying his work with a mixture of pride and humility. The mural, with its bold colors and emotive figures, stood as a beacon of inspiration, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming challenges, the human spirit could find ways to shine brightly. Passers-by stopped to admire the artwork, their faces reflecting a range of emotions, from awe to contemplation, each one touched by the story it told. Lucas knew that this was just the beginning. There were countless walls yet to be transformed, stories yet to be told, and lives yet to be touched by his art. His journey was far from over, but in that moment, surrounded by the vibrant colors and the dynamic energy of Sao Paulo, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The concrete jungle had been his canvas, and through his art, he had brought a splash of color and a message of resilience to the heart of the city. As the sun fully rose, casting a golden glow over the completed mural, Lucas packed up his supplies, his heart full of gratitude and hope. He knew that the path ahead would be filled with both triumphs and trials, but he was ready to face whatever challenges came his way. With each new mural, he would continue to paint his story, a story of resilience, creativity, and the unyielding spirit of an artist determined to make his mark on the world. In the days that followed, the mural became a symbol of the community's strength and unity. Local residents felt a sense of pride and ownership over the artwork, taking it upon themselves to preserve and protect it from the elements and vandalism. Community leaders recognized the positive impact Lucas's art had on the neighborhood, using it as a tool to promote social cohesion and economic development. The mural attracted visitors from neighboring areas, bringing attention and resources to the park and surrounding businesses. Lucas's influence extended beyond the walls he painted. He began to mentor young artists, sharing his techniques and encouraging them to find their own voices through street art. Workshops and collaborative projects flourished, creating a vibrant and supportive network of creatives who were inspired by Lucas's dedication and passion. Together, they embarked on collective endeavors to beautify the city, tackling larger projects that addressed broader social issues and celebrated the diversity of Sao Paulo's inhabitants. One such project was a series of murals dedicated to the unsung heroes of the community, teachers, healthcare workers, and everyday individuals who made significant contributions to the lives of others. These murals not only honored these individuals, but also served as a reminder of the importance of empathy and solidarity in building a stronger, more compassionate society. Lucas's ability to intertwine personal stories with broader themes of resilience and unity elevated his art from mere decoration to a powerful medium for social change. As Lucas continued to evolve as an artist, so did his style. He experimented with new techniques, incorporating elements of graffiti, stencil art, and digital projections to create immersive and interactive experiences. These innovations pushed the boundaries of traditional street art, inviting viewers to engage with the artwork on multiple levels and fostering a deeper connection between the artist and the audience. Each new project was a testament to his willingness to adapt and grow, never content to rest on his laurels, but always striving to push the limits of his creativity. The recognition Lucas received from the art community and the broader public further fueled his passion. Invitations to collaborate with international artists, participate in global street art festivals, and showcase his work in prestigious galleries came pouring in. While these opportunities brought new challenges and demands, Lucas remained grounded in his mission to use art as a force for good. He carefully balanced his personal projects with these external engagements, ensuring that each piece he created stayed true to his core values and the themes of resilience and community. One of the most significant moments in Lucas's career came when his work was featured in a major international street art exhibition in Berlin. The exhibition showcased the transformative power of street art in urban environments, and Lucas's mural from Sao Paulo was highlighted as a prime example of how art can inspire and unite communities. The exhibition attracted art enthusiasts, critics, and fellow artists from around the world, sparking conversations about the role of art in social change and the importance of supporting local artists. Lucas stood in front of his mural at the exhibition, surrounded by admirers and fellow artists who praised his work and its impact on the community. The recognition was both humbling and gratifying, affirming the countless hours of hard work and dedication he had poured into his art. Yet, amidst the accolades, Lucas remained focused on his mission, understanding that his journey was far from over. There were still walls to paint, stories to tell, and lives to touch through his art. As the exhibition came to a close, Lucas reflected on his journey from a struggling young artist in a modest neighborhood to a celebrated street painter whose work had made a tangible difference in his community. The mural in Parque do Ibirapuera was a symbol of what could be achieved through passion, resilience, and the unwavering belief in the power of creativity. It stood as a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, the human spirit could find ways to express itself and inspire others. Back in Sao Paulo, Lucas continued to push the boundaries of street art, embracing new challenges and opportunities with the same determination that had defined his early years. His work remained a vital part of the city's cultural landscape, a living testament to the transformative power of art and the enduring spirit of an artist committed to making a difference. As he set up his easel for another day's work, Lucas felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that with each new mural, he was not only beautifying the city but also leaving an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of those who encountered his art. In the end, Lucas' Andrade's story was more than just a tale of artistic success. It was a narrative of resilience, community, and the unyielding pursuit of one's passion. Through the vibrant colors and dynamic energy of his murals, Lucas had created a legacy that would inspire generations to come, proving that even in the concrete jungles of the world, the human spirit could thrive and transform its surroundings into canvases of hope and beauty. As the first pale glow of morning spread over Sao Paulo, the city came alive with a familiar chorus of murmuring voices, clattering dishes, and distant horns. Towering buildings framed the streets like monumental canvases, their concrete walls adorned with vibrant murals and clandestine signatures. Among these painted stories strode Lucas Andrade, a figure known only quietly among a small circle of local artists. From a distance, he looked ordinary enough, faded jeans speckled with flecks of paint, a loose shirt, a weathered baseball cap. Yet there was something about his posture, the determined tilt of his shoulders, that hinted at an inner flame. He carried a battered satchel with brushes, sprays, and cans, and he knew exactly where he would leave his mark this morning. He had chosen an old wall at the edge of Parque do Ibirapura, a place where nature softened the city's edges. Once gray and overlooked, this wall would soon bear something transformative. Lucas had grand plans, an expansive mural that spoke of struggle and resilience, themes that had long dominated his life and his art. As he mixed colors on his improvised palette, he remembered how it all began, how his love for painting had emerged from a childhood fraught with both hope and hardship. Lucas's childhood home was in Vila Mariana, a neighborhood teeming with activity, rich in culture, but never free from tension. Growing up, money was tight. His father, João, worked tirelessly in a mechanic shop, often coming home late with aching hands and grease under his nails. His mother, Maria, a schoolteacher, tried to support her children's interests despite their limited means. From an early age, Lucas was drawn to art, scribbling figures on scrap paper, transforming cardboard boxes into imagined cities, and losing himself in daydreams of swirling hues and shapes. The modest apartment they called home contained few luxuries, but Maria made sure there were always pencils and paper, even if it meant sacrificing her own small comforts. João, although weary, encouraged his boy with a quiet smile, acknowledging that art offered something transcendent. It was at school that Lucas first received real guidance. His art teacher, Mrs. Oliveira, quickly identified the spark in him. She introduced him to watercolors, charcoals, and oils, pushing him to experiment. Under her gentle mentorship, Lucas learned to express himself vividly. He began fusing realism with abstract flares, telling small stories through color and texture. He drew the local market stalls, the old men playing dominoes, the children chasing kites between crowded tenements. He learned that art could be both a window and a mirror, revealing the world outside while reflecting his internal struggles and dreams. His teenage years brought more challenges. Money grew scarcer, and João's health wavered after a workplace injury. The family faced mounting expenses, and Lucas felt pressure to pursue something safer, anything more secure than painting walls or sketching canvases. Yet he couldn't turn away from art. Whenever doubts gnawed at him, he'd find refuge in the bustling streets, observing graffiti splashed across abandoned buildings. Those unauthorized murals were declarations of existence, bold statements that their creators would not be silenced or forgotten. Street art offered Lucas a path that the conventional art world never could: immediate engagement with the public, the ability to transform neglected corners into emotional landmarks. Tentatively, Lucas made his first attempt at street painting. Armed with only a few cans of cheap spray paint and a borrowed ladder, he chose a hidden alley where nobody would bother him. His heart pounded as he worked under the dim streetlights, the hiss of the can echoing in the quiet night. The result was rough, imperfect, but it was there, etched permanently into the city's skin. In the days following, he returned to that alley and found people lingering, heads tilted, curious. Some frowned at what they saw as vandalism. Others nodded approvingly, sensing the raw sincerity in the strokes. Despite mixed reactions, Lucas felt liberated, recognizing that he had tapped into a direct conversation with the public, bypassing galleries and gatekeepers. Over time, he improved both technique and message. He learned which walls would withstand the paint, where to work without attracting too much unwanted attention from the authorities who considered his art a kind of trespass. He balanced stealth with openness, painting at dawn or dusk, racing the sun, discovering how colors popped against cracked plaster. His style evolved. He employed bold outlines, sweeping gestures, and rich palettes that seemed to hum with emotion. Slowly, people began to recognize his pieces around the neighborhood, calling him the quiet painter or that kid with the colors. Sometimes he included motifs that resonated with local struggles, depictions of tired workers, mothers cradling children, hopeful eyes staring over graffitied horizons. He learned that by reflecting their daily realities, he also affirmed his own place in the tapestry of Sao Paulo. His first breakthrough came with a mural he titled Hope in the Shadows. This piece emerged from a collaboration with neighbors who contributed their stories. One woman spoke of raising 3 children alone after losing her job. Another man recounted his futile search for better work. Lucas listened, transmuting their tales into images, a cluster of hands lifting each other upwards, silhouettes stepping out of darkness into warm light, abstract shapes suggesting resilience and unity. When completed, the mural struck a chord. People recognized themselves in its vibrant figures, and its fame spread through word of mouth. It became a landmark, something locals pointed out with pride. For Lucas, it was proof that art mattered, that painting a wall could change how people saw their world. But success invited new challenges. Authorities eyed his work suspiciously, debating whether to classify it as public art or defacement. He faced criticism from some who argued that spray cans on public walls were an affront to order. Yet, he also received invitations. Small businesses asked for murals that would attract customers, community centers wanted workshops for children. Lucas embraced these opportunities carefully, wary of losing the raw authenticity that defined his work. He wanted to remain a voice for the community, not just a commodity. Still, the income helped him buy better materials and experiment with grander visions. During this period, Lucas refined his craft. He studied perspectives and color theory, adapting techniques from classical painting to his street medium. He began using layering methods, giving his murals depth and texture. He also told more complex stories, visual narratives about environmental concerns, corruption, or the perseverance of the poor. Some murals depicted 2 worlds separated by a line of paint. On one side, grim poverty and struggle, on the other, bright promise and change. These pieces were not always comfortable to look at, but they were honest. Neighbors talked about them, argued over their meaning, and sometimes found new hope in their bold depictions. One evening, as he rested after finishing a mural on a community hall, Lucas met Sophia, an organizer who ran literacy programs for teenagers. She praised his work, explaining how the mural's imagery of young people holding books aloft inspired her students. Intrigued, Lucas offered to teach a few art lessons. Soon he was guiding students, showing them how to find their own forms of expression. In their laughter and eager attempts, he recognized himself as a younger artist, uncertain and hopeful. He taught them that art could highlight injustices, celebrate small victories, or simply add beauty to grim spaces. These connections expanded his understanding of art's purpose. It wasn't just about leaving a personal imprint on the city's walls, but also nurturing new voices, sharing the brush so that others could paint their stories. Lucas's impact began radiating outward. A local NGO invited him to participate in a project revitalizing abandoned lots. He worked alongside other artists, planting seeds of color where weeds once choked the earth. Bit by bit, art turned desolate corners into communal meeting grounds. His murals served as backdrops for neighborhood festivals, concerts, and political rallies. Journalists took note, writing pieces about the transformative painter of Vila Mariana and how his art brought people together. With greater visibility came more resources. He could afford quality paints, collaborate with skilled peers, and dream up ambitious large-scale projects. Yet he refused to lose touch with his roots. He made sure to return to his old alleyways, to the humble walls that first embraced his paint, reminding himself that at its core, his work was an act of love for the community that shaped him. Still, adversity persisted. There were disputes over public space and legal threats if he painted on certain surfaces without permission. Sometimes he fell into despair when a newly finished mural was vandalized overnight. Financial worries lingered. Though he had some commissions, he'd never become wealthy from street art, and the pressures of daily life weighed on him. In quiet moments, he contemplated whether his efforts truly mattered. But inevitably, he would stumble upon someone standing silently before one of his murals, tears glistening in their eyes, or a child excitedly pointing at a detail he had painted. In those moments, he knew that he was making a difference. Now, at Parque do Ibirapura, he worked tirelessly beneath a brightening sky. The mural he was creating this morning would be a testament to perseverance. Within its shapes, one might discern abstract forms of families holding onto each other in storms, silhouettes climbing ladders out of deep ravines, and hands reaching for blossoms that symbolized renewal. The onlookers who paused saw not just pretty colors, but a reflection of their own endurance. Before Lucas's mural, strangers sometimes struck up conversations, sharing personal hardships and dreams. The wall became a living dialogue. As the final strokes dried, Lucas stepped back, aching but satisfied. The piece would stand for years, he hoped, whispering its message to anyone who cared to look. He felt gratitude for his parents, who had believed in him even when it made no sense. He was thankful for Mrs. Oliveira, who had given him guidance, and for the community that embraced his art and allowed it to speak for them. He knew that his journey as a street artist was far from complete. There were still countless walls to paint, stories to tell, lessons to share. In time, more chapters would unfold, opportunities to mentor young artists, to collaborate with international street painters, to push his style into uncharted territory. Yet the foundation had been laid. Here, in the concrete heart of Sao Paulo, through paint and passion, Lucas Andrade had found his purpose, forging a legacy that would remind countless souls that, even amid adversity, beauty and hope could be coaxed from blank walls. The late afternoon light filtered through a haze of exhaust and drifting dust as Lucas surveyed a series of old, peeling walls on the northern edge of the city center. He had spent the better part of his day scouting for a new canvas, another neglected surface where his art could tell a story, provoke a thought, or plant a seed of hope. Yet, as the hours wore on, his options had narrowed. Many of his favorite spots had been reclaimed by construction projects, turned into upscale storefronts or gated residences that offered no room for an artist's brush. Others had been painted over by rival taggers or buff cleaned by city crews, leaving him with few choices and an uncomfortable sense of urgency. He needed a space not just to paint, but to breathe. His latest commission, an ambitious piece meant to highlight environmental concerns and the fragile state of Sao Paulo's green spaces, required a large, visible wall and a stretch of time to work uninterrupted. Sponsors were expecting results, and local activists were eager to see his vision come to life. Yet, finding a suitable and stable location felt like trying to catch smoke in his hands. The city's attitude toward street art had always been ambivalent. On one hand, Sao Paulo prided itself on being a global capital of urban art. On the other, municipal regulations and shifting political winds made it perilously easy for an artist's work to be deemed illegal overnight. Lucas knew that what once passed as creative revitalization could quickly be labeled as vandalism if painted in the wrong place at the wrong time. He'd learned this lesson painfully in the past, when a piece he created on a neglected warehouse, one he assumed nobody cared about, was painted over by order of a local official who claimed it encouraged delinquency. His pleas that it honored local craftsmen who once worked there fell on deaf ears. The warehouse's owners, mostly absent, paid little mind to the mural's removal. As if that weren't enough, the city fined him for unauthorized painting. He still remembered the knot in his stomach as he parted with what little savings he had to settle the issue. These experiences weighed heavily on him now. He walked along a quiet side street, analyzing the texture of old concrete and brick, trying to imagine how his next design would fit. He wanted to depict a forest scene woven with subtle warnings about pollution and deforestation, lush greens and earthy browns interrupted by jagged streaks of gray and black. But what if, after all the hours of work, it got erased? The threat of impermanence was both a curse and a hallmark of street art, something every artist grappled with. Still, these new pressures, deadlines, expectations, financial burdens, made the fragility of his craft harder to bear. Financial strains pressed in from all sides. While he had gained a modest following and even a few paying commissions, Lucas remained far from secure. Rent for his cramped studio apartment crept upward, and art supplies were never cheap. To stretch his budget, he often scoured hardware stores for discounted paints and made his own brushes from salvaged materials. He saved old aerosol nozzles to reuse and watered down certain pigments to make them last. On days when money ran short, he skipped meals or relied on black coffee to stave off hunger. He sometimes wondered if this was a fair trade, his art for this precarious existence. But then he would remember the faces of those who found meaning in his work, the local kids who stared wide-eyed at his murals, the neighbors who thanked him for making their streets feel alive. That, he told himself, was worth the struggle. Just before dusk, he arrived at a corner he hadn't visited in months. It was a wide intersection where two old apartment buildings faced each other across a narrow road. One side featured a patchwork of old paint and graffiti scrawls, including faded political slogans and half-finished characters from artists who'd come and gone. On the other side, a vacant building loomed, its windows boarded up, its facade cracked. A friend once mentioned that the owners had long abandoned it, tied up in legal battles over inheritance. Perhaps it was a risk. If anyone decided to file a complaint, Lucas could be fined again, but he couldn't shake the idea that this vacant structure, forgotten by time, was perfect. He stood before the chipped facade, imagining it covered by a sweeping mural that would evoke a sense of nature overrunning decay. Green vines painted in bold strokes would climb the columns, birds perched on sills, leaves spilling from the edges as if the forest were reclaiming what humanity had left behind. He pictured intricate details, a monkey's curious face peering from behind a crack, a bright macaw in flight, clouds reflected in ghostly window panes. It felt right, thematically resonant. The challenge was clear. He had to approach it with stealth and care, painting at odd hours, working piece by piece. He would spend the next few nights here, painting quietly under the cover of darkness, hoping no one would mind and that, in the end, the message would justify the means. Still, he knew that at any moment, a patrol car could stop, and he'd have to explain himself to a pair of unsmiling officers. He had the unfortunate experience of such encounters, stern lectures about defacing property, the threat of arrest if he didn't cease immediately. In some instances, he was lucky. A sympathetic officer who appreciated art might give him a warning and leave him be. In others, he had no choice but to pack up and vanish into the night, work unfinished, spirit deflated. Each time, it was another reminder that what he did lived in a gray zone, tolerated by some, despised by others. Before he left to rest and gather supplies for this new project, Lucas paused to consider the unspoken agreements he'd formed over the years. Street art flourished on the willingness of neighborhoods to accept it, or at least not to oppose it. By talking to residents, befriending shopkeepers, and involving local kids in the creative process, he'd learned how to cultivate goodwill. He remembered a time he painted a mural near a bakery, and the bakery's owner offered him bread each morning as long as he kept the area tidy. Another time, a group of neighbors formed an informal watch, letting him know if authorities were coming, so he could slip away before trouble arrived. Trust went a long way, and he intended to continue earning it. As the next few nights unfolded, Lucas slipped into a new routine. He'd arrive just before midnight, carrying a rickety ladder, paint buckets, and spray cans. Under the dim glow of a distant street lamp, he worked carefully, outlining the composition. He started with the base layers, broad strokes of green and brown that would anchor the piece. He took advantage of the building's broken contours. The chipped plaster became a rugged forest floor, the cracked edges of windows metamorphosed into twisting vines. He painted quietly, listening to the distant hum of late-night traffic and the soft chirping of insects. Occasionally, a curious passerby would appear, drawn by the gentle rasp of spray paint. Lucas would nod silently, a conspiratorial smile shared beneath the shadows, as if they were both in on a secret. Over successive nights, the painting grew more intricate. He added birds with carefully blended plumage, leaves and gradients of emerald and sage, subtle highlights that caught imaginary moonlight. Despite the tension of working illicitly, he found solace in the act of creation. Here, in the silent hours, he could focus entirely on his craft, free from the city's relentless demands. The financial struggles, the bureaucratic hassles, the fear of being caught, they receded momentarily. He was just an artist, lost in the beauty he conjured from stone and pigment. Yet the anxiety never completely disappeared. With each new detail, he risked discovery. A patrol car could swing by at any time, a resident might file a complaint. On the third night, his heart seized when he saw approaching headlights. He ducked behind a column, holding his breath as a pair of figures passed by. They were just revelers, perhaps leaving a late-night gathering, oblivious to his presence. He exhaled slowly and returned to his work, fingers trembling slightly. This tightrope walk between creation and erasure was exhausting. Financial worries also weighed on him, growing more insistent as a client politely requested updates on when they could unveil his latest mural for an environmental awareness campaign. He needed to finish this piece soon, photograph it, and present it as part of his portfolio to secure a small grant that might stabilize his finances. Every hour counted. He began skipping meals again, relying on caffeine and adrenaline. Though this worried him, he knew no other way. He had chosen a difficult path, one without a safety net. But what alternative existed? Give up art for a steady job that would dull his spirit? No, that was not an option. In these tense days, he found encouragement in unexpected places. One afternoon, while searching for cheaper paint at a supply store, he overheard two customers talking about the new forest mural appearing downtown. They wondered who the artist was, admiring the courage it took to paint something so lush and hopeful in a neglected spot. Lucas pretended not to listen, but inside he glowed with pride. That people noticed, that they cared, reaffirmed his mission. Another time, a friend texted him a blurry smartphone photo of the mural's early outlines, joking, "Dude, this looks like you tamed the jungle and stuck it on a building." These small affirmations were nourishment for his soul. Finally, after nearly a week of stolen nights and hurried brushstrokes, Lucas stepped back and surveyed his finished work. The vacant building's facade had become a living tapestry of color and narrative. Thick vines snaked upward, leaves arched gracefully, and bright birds soared against a canopy of layered greens. Hidden within the foliage were subtle warnings, dark silhouettes of chainsaws, faint outlines of tree stumps, reminding viewers that nature's balance hung by a thread. The mural offered no easy answers, but it compelled people to look, to think, and maybe, just maybe, to care a bit more. As dawn approached, Lucas took a few photographs, careful to capture the mural's details and its interplay with the building's decayed surfaces. Soon he would present these images to his patrons, hoping to secure funding and more stable work. Perhaps one day, he could negotiate with property owners to paint legally, to create sanctioned works that wouldn't vanish overnight. But even if such stability proved elusive, he would continue. The struggle for space, physical, financial, and emotional, was a crucible that shaped him and his art. It reminded him that true creativity often thrived in adversity, that the hardest-fought canvases could become the most meaningful. And so, as he packed up his supplies and melted back into the city's awakening streets, Lucas accepted the uncertain future with a quiet determination. He knew that tomorrow might bring another confrontation with the law, another bill he couldn't pay, or another wall lost to gentrification. But he also knew that he'd keep painting, keep fighting for his place in the urban landscape. After all, the city needed voices like his, voices that could transform neglect into beauty, chaos into conversation, and struggle into a stubborn, iridescent hope. In the following weeks, Lucas found himself caught in a turbulent current of challenges that threatened to derail his momentum. The mural he had painted under cover of darkness drew attention, yes, but not all of it was positive. Early one morning, as he strolled back to the site to marvel at the completed work, he discovered a small group of uniformed officers scrutinizing it from the sidewalk. He froze, instinctively wanting to vanish into the crowd, but something in their posture made him linger, curious, worried, uncertain. One of the officers turned, scanning the faces around him. Lucas felt exposed, as if the colors on the wall had seeped into his skin, marking him as the culprit. Yet, the officer didn't point a finger or raise his voice. Instead, he sighed, and Lucas overheard snippets of their conversation. The building was legally in limbo, they said, so pressing charges wasn't straightforward. But the mural's sudden appearance had sparked complaints. One neighbor insisted it encouraged squatters, another claimed it lowered property values. Already, there were calls to paint it over. Lucas's stomach twisted at the idea of his work being erased. He wanted to step forward, to argue that the mural brought beauty to a barren place, that it reminded people of nature's fragility. But he held his tongue. Confrontation here could end badly. His silence, however, weighed heavily on him as he retreated behind a parked van, heart pounding. Days later, he received a terse email from the environmental group he'd hoped would sponsor him. They thanked him for his interest but expressed concern about the mural's legality. They needed art that wouldn't spark controversies or fines. Disappointment crashed over him. Without their support, paying rent and replenishing supplies grew more difficult. Each setback felt like a gust of wind threatening to snuff out his flame. Tensions rose elsewhere too. A local official, pressured by conservative voters, announced a crackdown on graffiti vandals. Rumors spread through the artist community, fresh patrols, harsher penalties, no tolerance for murals without explicit permits. Lucas's phone buzzed constantly with messages from fellow artists, each piece of news grimmer than the last. Some suggested lying low, others planned to protest. Most were frightened, unsure how to continue their craft under increased scrutiny. Lucas wrestled with his own doubts. He had always accepted the precarious balance of street art, its impermanence, its uncertain legality. But this felt different. It wasn't just that he might lose a mural, it was that the city's mood had turned hostile. If he was caught in the act again, fines would be the least of his worries. He could face arrest, a criminal record, the ultimate silencing of his voice. And for what? A moment of beauty on a crumbling wall? He found temporary solace in quiet corners of the city. Wandering through a rundown park, he spotted a child drawing on the pavement with chalk, simple stick figures, and sunbursts. The child's mother smiled, unperturbed by the fact that the drawing would vanish at the next rain. Lucas was reminded that all art bore risk and impermanence. That child didn't hesitate for fear of criticism or erasure. She drew because she wanted to, because it mattered to her in that fleeting moment. Encouraged by this small scene, Lucas resolved to hold steady. He decided to paint smaller pieces, focusing on hidden spots that wouldn't attract immediate official wrath. He ventured into abandoned lots and forgotten passages, leaving modest images of saplings breaking through asphalt, birds sheltering under rusted beams. These weren't grand statements, they were quiet whispers of resilience. He worked at odd hours, ears alert, heart thrumming. Somehow, these secret paintings felt even more personal, as if he were passing love notes to the city's neglected corners. During one such covert outing, he stumbled upon another artist, a woman with a shaved head and ink-stained fingertips, painting a delicate hummingbird on a factory's old loading dock. Startled, they locked eyes. She gave a cautious nod. Lucas hesitated, then stepped closer, whispering a compliment about her brushwork. She introduced herself as Flavia, a muralist renowned in certain circles for portraits of extinct animals. They spoke softly, voices muffled by concrete, sharing tips on evading patrols, mixing cheaper pigments, and securing hidden escape routes. Flavia's calm determination impressed Lucas. She spoke of art as an act of defiance and care, a reason to keep going even when rules tightened and doors closed. That night, they helped each other finish their pieces. When dawn neared, they parted with a silent understanding that they were not alone, that in adversity artists could find solidarity. This newfound sense of connection fortified Lucas's resolve. He approached a few old allies, community organizers, shop owners sympathetic to his cause, and asked for help. Some offered space on their private walls, granting him permission to paint freely. Others introduced him to patrons who appreciated street art's raw honesty. A cafe owner, inspired by the forest mural he'd heard about, invited Lucas to paint a small piece inside the cafe. It wouldn't be as public or grand, but it would put food on Lucas's table and show that his art had value beyond alleys. Surprising opportunities emerged. A teacher from a nearby school requested a workshop for her students, hoping that learning about art's power would help them navigate their own hardships. Lucas hesitated, remembering how Mrs. Oliveira's guidance once shaped his path. He agreed, finding himself before a classroom of bright-eyed teenagers eager to learn about murals, color theory, and the meaning behind them. He showed them sketches, told stories of the city's shifting walls, and watched as their faces lit up with possibility. The students asked questions that reminded him why he painted in the first place, to communicate, to uplift, to make people see beauty where it was least expected. Though the crackdown continued outside, Lucas found that adversity clarified his purpose. He could not control the laws or quell the fears of those who disliked his art. But he could adapt, responding with smaller pieces, hidden gestures, and alliances with those who believed in him. When a friend suggested organizing a small, secret exhibition in a borrowed warehouse, Lucas embraced the idea. They cleared dusty crates, hung canvases for a change, and invited trusted friends and neighbors. Under dim overhead bulbs, people gathered to admire works that echoed the street's vibrancy without inviting immediate punishment. This makeshift gallery reminded Lucas that art's power didn't rely solely on large public murals. It thrived wherever people chose to embrace it. He sold a few small paintings that night, scenes of imagined jungles reclaiming urban ruins, portraits of local faces blending into patterns of leaves and birds. While not enough to solve all his troubles, these sales provided a lifeline, allowing him to replace dried-up brushes and near-empty paint cans. Leaving the warehouse after the exhibition, Lucas passed through the quiet streets with a lighter step. The city's clampdown on street art still loomed, and he knew that harder days might yet come. But he had found fresh courage. Standing amid new friends, teaching eager students, and painting modest visions into lost corners reminded him that adversity was not an ending, but a turning point. He could alter his methods, forge new connections, and keep creating in whatever ways possible. As the moon hung low over Sao Paulo's skyline, Lucas accepted that he would face adversity repeatedly. The city's moods would shift, laws would tighten and loosen, and critics would whisper or shout. Yet, as long as he held onto his brushes, his stories, and the profound need to bring color and meaning into the world, he would endure. There, in the hush of the night, he stood resolved, an artist unbroken, ready to answer every attempt at silence with another stroke of paint. Over the next few weeks, the winds of change drifted quietly through the city's veins, subtle yet palpable. As Lucas walked through the streets, a wary sense of calm had settled over the art community. Some of the harshest crackdowns had ebbed. The authorities, distracted by other civic issues, seemed to lose momentum on their zero-tolerance crusade. The atmosphere remained tense, but not suffocating. And in that fragile equilibrium, something within Lucas began to shift. It started with a message he received late one evening. A local gallery owner, Enrique Vasconcelos, whom Lucas had admired from a distance, reached out with an unexpected proposal. Enrique's gallery, situated in a reclaimed warehouse near the old train lines, had gained a reputation for spotlighting emerging talents who fused art with social commentary. He had seen Lucas's smaller works displayed in that secret warehouse exhibition and was intrigued. The idea of featuring a street artist who had navigated both acclaim and adversity excited him. He wanted Lucas to consider a joint project, a formal exhibit inside the gallery's walls, complemented by a sanctioned mural outside it. Lucas read the message twice, hardly believing his luck. An official endorsement from a respected gallery meant stability, maybe even a slight easing of his financial strains. But more than that, it promised legitimacy, an opportunity to bridge the gap between the raw immediacy of street art and the curated world of galleries. He replied cautiously, asking about the terms. Enrique responded with enthusiasm. The gallery would cover materials, handle permits, and provide a small stipend. In return, they wanted Lucas to create a mural that would stay up for at least a year, become a kind of landmark for visitors. The indoor exhibit would showcase sketches, preliminary studies, and smaller canvases, offering the audience a behind-the-scenes look at his process. There would even be a Q&A session, a chance for Lucas to speak directly about his motivations and methods. The proposal filled Lucas with both excitement and trepidation. He'd always painted on his own terms, navigating legal gray areas and relying on covert kindnesses. Now, a legitimate path opened before him. Would it dilute the essence of his art? Was he compromising his principles by stepping into a gallery environment? He mulled these questions over coffee with Flavia, who offered a steadying perspective. Sanctioned spaces don't have to mean selling out, she said, leaning back against a graffiti-scarred pillar in her studio. They can let you reach people who don't roam the streets at midnight looking for murals. You can show them the heart behind what you do. That might change their perceptions, maybe even the way they see the city. Encouraged by her words, Lucas met with Enrique in person. The gallery owner, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard and a warm, knowing gaze, spoke passionately about his mission to elevate street art. The streets are your stage, he said, but a gallery can be your classroom. Help people understand the layers of meaning in your work. If we do this right, we might inspire more tolerance, perhaps even push the city to appreciate the value of public art. This framing resonated with Lucas. He agreed to the collaboration, his heart fluttering with anticipation. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning. He chose a theme that reflected his journey and the city's complexities, roots, and routes. The gallery facade would bear a grand mural depicting a sprawling root system weaving through concrete, sprouting leaves and blossoms from cracks in the pavement. Within those roots, hidden forms would suggest communities, memories, and dreams pushing through adversity. Inside, he'd hang sketches showing how the piece evolved, from rough pencil outlines in a coffee-stained notebook to color tests on scrap cardboard. As he sketched late into the night, Lucas realized this was more than a commission. It was a turning point. In previous chapters of his life, he'd fought tooth and nail for space, recognition, and survival. Now he stood at the threshold of a new era where his art might shape public discourse more openly. He had a platform not just to paint but to speak, to explain, to convince. The gravity of it both thrilled and unsettled him. He began work on the gallery's exterior wall during early mornings when traffic was light. Enrique had secured all necessary permits, so Lucas painted in the sunlight, no longer a fugitive figure scanning for patrol cars. Passers-by paused, curious. Some recognized his style from the city's hidden corners. Others were newcomers, intrigued by the spectacle of an artist painting legally, proudly, under a gallery's banner. He answered their questions when approached, grateful he no longer had to duck behind dumpsters or vanish into crowds. Instead, he could talk openly about the meaning of his imagery, the tension between nature and industry, the resilience of communities, the hope of seedlings pushing through cracked asphalt. Inside the gallery, he arranged his sketches and smaller works carefully, ensuring that each piece told part of a larger story. Photographs of past murals, many now vanished or altered, lined one wall. On another, he displayed experimental canvases that explored new techniques and motifs. He even included an old childhood drawing, wrinkled, faded, of a makeshift city in rainbow colors. It was a quiet nod to the origins of his creative spark and a tribute to his parents' early support. On opening night, a small crowd gathered. Artists, journalists, neighborhood residents, and curious city dwellers filtered in, sipping wine and murmuring in hushed tones as they examined the works. Lucas stood near the entrance, anxious but composed, dressed simply in a black shirt and slacks. Flavia arrived, offering a supportive wink. Enrique made introductory remarks, praising Lucas's unique voice and bridging the informal energy of street art with the reflective environment of a gallery. When Lucas stepped forward to speak, his throat tightened. He was used to expressing himself with paint, not words. But as he scanned the expectant faces, he found courage. He spoke about growing up in Villa Mariana, about painting walls at dawn, unsure if anyone would care or understand. He talked of challenges, financial insecurity, harassment, the ache of seeing his work wiped away, and about the moments that convinced him to keep going, a child smiling at a finished mural, a neighbor thanking him for bringing color to a dingy corner. He explained that roots and routes represented both the anchor of his beginnings and the paths forward for a city that needed renewal and empathy. His voice trembled at first, then steadied, as if guided by an invisible hand. The audience responded with thoughtful questions. Some asked about his technique, others about the political implications of his themes. A few wondered if he feared losing authenticity in a more formal setting. Lucas answered honestly, admitting that he'd worried about that, too. "But I realized authenticity comes from intention, not location," he said quietly. "The streets taught me to value sincerity, and I'm bringing that sincerity here. We're all part of this city's story, and I'm just trying to reflect that." The event was a success. Local critics applauded his versatility, praising how the gallery exhibit enriched their understanding of his outdoor work. Art students approached him timidly, asking for advice. A reporter requested an interview for a cultural program, and a local official, once suspicious of street art, remarked that maybe the city should reevaluate its stance on public murals. Lucas listened, almost stunned. His art had opened doors, facilitated conversations he never thought possible. That night, as he wandered home, he felt different. Before, he had defined himself by struggle, fighting for space, dodging authorities, scraping by financially. Now, he sensed an evolving role, not just as a fighter, but as a bridge. He could connect the raw vitality of the streets with more structured platforms, showing skeptics that street artists were not vandals but storytellers who honored their communities. This new path didn't mean forsaking his origins. He would still paint in hidden alleys, still whisper hope into forgotten corners. But now he could also stand openly under the city's lights, guiding others to see what he saw. In the silence of his apartment, he contemplated the future. He would continue teaching workshops, encouraging young artists to find their voices. He might collaborate with environmental groups again, now that he had a more secure base. Flavia had mentioned a mural exchange program with another Latin American city. Perhaps he'd travel, trading influences and techniques with distant peers. The possibilities stretched before him like a horizon tinted in the colors of his mural. With each brushstroke and choice he made, Lucas realized the greatest turning point lay not in the gallery walls or the city's shifting policies, but within himself. He had grown from a shy kid sketching on scrap paper into an artist who could stand before a crowd and advocate for art's power. Whether under stars or halogens, in secret alleys or elegant galleries, his mission remained the same: to paint resilience and imagination across the canvas of a world that desperately needed both. In the weeks following the gallery exhibition, Lucas felt a subtle but profound change in the rhythm of his days. The city still bore its familiar scars, crumbling facades, wary glances, and the lingering memory of recent crackdowns, but now there was a new current of possibility running beneath the surface. He sensed it when he passed by the mural outside the gallery and caught people lingering, taking photos, discussing the imagery with strangers. He sensed it in the emails arriving in his inbox, invitations to collaborate with other artists, requests from community organizations, and even a curious inquiry from a university professor wanting him to guest lecture about the social impact of street art. Such opportunities would have seemed unimaginable a short time ago. Before the gallery collaboration, Lucas had moved through the city as a solitary figure, uncertain and often unseen. Now he felt like a node in a growing network of creative minds, painters, poets, musicians, dancers, individuals who believed that art could spark conversations and nurture empathy. He started attending gatherings in small cultural centers or cafes where creators swapped stories and ideas. He listened more than he spoke, intrigued by their visions and eager to learn from their experiences. One such meeting introduced him to Priya, an environmental activist working to transform neglected public spaces into green microhabitats. She spoke passionately about painting with plants, turning empty lots into community gardens and abandoned rooftops into pollinator refuges. Inspired, Lucas proposed a joint project. He could paint a mural celebrating biodiversity on a long-ignored wall beside one of her garden plots, visually tying art and ecology together. Priya's eyes lit up at the idea. They agreed to plan something that summer, inviting residents to help choose the mural's theme and maybe even offer seedlings for the garden. This kind of synergy fueled Lucas's creativity. He realized he no longer had to rely solely on surreptitious interventions or reluctant commissions. He could team up with those who shared his values, making art that served a tangible purpose beyond the aesthetic. And so, he plunged forward, sketching ideas that combined plant motifs, native birds, and symbolic imagery evoking renewal. He imagined mornings spent painting while local volunteers pulled weeds and planted flowers, the hum of bees and laughter mixing with the scent of fresh earth and acrylic paint. Meanwhile, his workshops with students at the neighborhood school flourished. Initially, he'd shown them the basics, color theory, proportions, how to use simple tools. But as trust grew, their questions became more profound. Why did he paint in hidden places before going public? How did he find courage when faced with criticism? Did he believe art could truly change people's minds? Standing at the front of the classroom, Lucas found himself articulating ideas he'd never fully formed into words. He told them that art was a language as essential and universal as music or dance. Sometimes it whispered comfort, sometimes it shouted truths, and often it asked questions no one else dared ask. He encouraged them to find their own voices, explaining that their sketches and doodles, however small, had the power to convey meaning and shape perceptions. To his surprise, the students embraced these ideas wholeheartedly. They organized a mural project within the school's courtyard, pooling their sketches and voting on themes. After weeks of deliberation, they settled on journeys, painting a collective scene in which each student contributed a piece: a train winding through hills, footsteps crossing bridges, birds navigating starry skies. Lucas guided their hands but let them lead the narrative. In the end, the courtyard burst with color and story, and the children took enormous pride in what they'd created together. Watching them beam with achievement, Lucas recalled his own youth and how a single supportive teacher had ignited the spark that led him here. As his circle of influence expanded, Lucas noticed a subtle shift in how some city officials regarded him. The gallery event and subsequent coverage in local news had turned him into something of a cultural figure, still modest in fame, but no longer an unknown. A council member who once dismissed street art as vandalism now spoke to him at a community forum, acknowledging that his murals seemed to engage residents positively. While no sweeping policy changes had occurred yet, Lucas sensed an opening. If the city was willing to listen, perhaps he and other artists could advocate for designated mural zones or simpler permit processes. It was a small step, but small steps mattered. During quieter evenings in his apartment, he experimented with new techniques on small canvases. Inspired by the collaborative energies swirling around him, he introduced materials he'd rarely used before: fragments of recycled paper, natural pigments derived from crushed leaves or spices, and even bits of fabric woven into the paint. He allowed himself to think beyond the concrete walls he'd always worked on, exploring new textures and mediums. This expansion of his craft felt liberating. No longer bound by the fear of being caught or erased, he could dedicate himself to skill, depth, and innovation. He also reconnected with Flavia. The two artists met regularly now, sometimes with coffee at a market stall, other times wandering alleys to admire the latest ephemeral works. They shared stories of near misses with patrols and the joy of watching unsuspecting strangers react to their art. Flavia showed him sketches for a new series of murals focusing on climate migrants, blending human faces with migratory birds to illustrate the displacement of communities and wildlife. Lucas listened, enthralled, and realized again how art's true strength lay in its capacity to translate complex issues into emotions and images people could feel in their bones. One afternoon, as they strolled through a quiet district, they stumbled upon a half-finished mural by an unknown artist. It depicted a city street half-sunk underwater, fish swimming among traffic lights and submerged cars. It was eerie, haunting, and incomplete. Lucas looked at Flavia, who raised an eyebrow, as if to say, "Should we?" Without speaking, they silently agreed. Flavia whipped out a small set of brushes she carried in her bag. Lucas retrieved a half-full can of green paint. Together, they extended the mural, adding a glimmer of hope, tiny sprouts pushing through cracks in the submerged asphalt, and a hint of sunlight filtering below the watery surface. It was a wordless collaboration, a spontaneous gesture of solidarity with an unseen artist. They left it and signed, a gift to whoever passed by, a quiet testament to community over ego. That evening, returning home, Lucas realized that he had stepped fully into a new phase of his artistic life. Struggle had not vanished, but it no longer defined him entirely. Now he moved in a world where adversity could spark resilience and where cooperation could amplify impact. The city remained a rough canvas, layered with noise, contradictions, and injustices. But he no longer felt alone or powerless. Supported by allies, recognized by those who once doubted him, he could shape the urban narrative in ways that nurtured growth and understanding. As he stood at his window, he imagined the city as a living organism, veins of traffic, lungs of green spaces, neurons of cultural exchange. He pictured its wounded parts healing through collective care, murals that highlighted forgotten histories, gardens that reclaimed vacant lots, workshops that empowered the next generation. He saw himself not as a lone revolutionary, but as one part of a larger ecosystem, contributing his colors and concepts to a grand, evolving tapestry. The realization brought a gentle smile to his face. He would continue to paint, yes, but also to listen, mentor, and collaborate. Transformation and growth were not just themes for his artwork, they were the guiding principles of his life. In that moment, as the last light of evening brushed the rooftops, Lucas felt a sense of calm purpose unlike anything he'd known before. He was rooted in the city, intertwined with its people, and reaching ever upward toward new horizons of creation and change. Despite the strides he'd made and the alliances he'd formed, Lucas soon found himself confronting one of the most daunting hurdles of his career. It began quietly, as troubles often do, with rumors whispered in the back rooms of community gatherings and hinted at in emails that never fully explained themselves. The building that hosted one of his earliest, most celebrated murals, Hope in the Shadows, was at risk of being sold and demolished. A developer, it seemed, had grand plans to replace the aging structure with sleek apartments and upscale storefronts. The mural, born from the collective stories and struggles of the neighborhood, could vanish beneath rubble and progress. News of the potential demolition spread, stirring unease and anger. Hope in the Shadows wasn't just a mural, it had become a cultural anchor. People brought friends there to share their memories, local teachers referenced it in lessons, and occasionally someone would leave a single flower beneath it as if honoring its silent testament to perseverance. To watch it erased would mean losing an irreplaceable piece of the community's identity. Lucas felt a tight knot in his chest each time he passed by the building. He had always known his murals could be ephemeral. Paint faded, walls were repurposed, and governments changed their stance on public art. But this piece mattered deeply, not only to him, but to countless others. It represented a moment when he'd first proven that art could bind a community, encourage dialogue, and celebrate resilience. He couldn't let it go without a fight. He reached out to the residents who'd once shared their stories for the mural's creation. They were as upset as he was, if not more. Some had formed a loosely organized neighborhood committee to oppose the development. They collected signatures, held impromptu meetings on the sidewalk, and even proposed that the city designate the wall as a protected cultural site. It was a long shot, but worth trying. Lucas offered to help however he could. He lent his voice at gatherings and spoke with a humility that came from understanding that while he painted the piece, it belonged to everyone who had shaped it. Priya and Flavia rallied to his side, each contributing their strengths. Priya contacted environmental groups to argue that the green space behind the building, although modest, played a vital role in the neighborhood's ecosystem. Flavia reached out to fellow artists, encouraging them to create supportive artworks that champion cultural preservation. Soon, vibrant posters appeared on utility poles, social media campaigns spread the word, and a petition found supporters beyond the local community. The threatened demolition transformed into a public debate about the soul of the city. Journalists picked up the story, curious about why a single mural had stirred so much passion. They interviewed longtime residents who praised how hope in the shadows reminded them of their shared histories. They spoke to art enthusiasts who argued that such works were a form of living memory, more real and accessible than artifacts locked away in museums. They even interviewed Lucas, who explained that he never intended to freeze the past in place, but to help people see the beauty and courage in their own lives. Now, he hoped that the city's guardians of policy and development might recognize art's intangible value before it was too late. Still, the developer pressed on, filing paperwork and securing initial permits. At a tense community meeting in a cramped auditorium, the developer's representative insisted that progress required sacrifice. The mural was nice, he conceded, but hardly essential. Economic growth, he argued, would uplift everyone eventually. Some in the crowd murmured agreement. Change was inevitable. Others shouted that not all change was good and that culture should not be sacrificed at the altar of profit. Lucas sat in the back, heart pounding. He felt helpless, a mere painter pitted against corporate machinery. That night, as he brooded alone in his apartment, he pondered what else he could do. What if he recreated the mural elsewhere? But it wouldn't be the same. That wall was integral to the piece's meaning. He considered leaving it as a memory, archiving it in photos and videos. Yet giving up felt wrong. Then a thought struck him. What if he invited the public to protect it not through confrontation, but through renewed creativity? Within days, Lucas organized an open-air art event directly in front of the contested wall. The theme was Defend the Roots. Anyone could participate, kids with chalk, poets reciting verses, dancers performing steps inspired by city rhythms. Priya brought seedlings in small pots, handing them to visitors as symbols of growth. Flavia arrived with a portable projector that cast images of other murals onto the crumbling facade, reminding people that this struggle was part of a broader narrative. All evening, the block buzzed with creative energy. People painted temporary patterns on the pavement, traced their hands in charcoal, and wrote messages of hope and solidarity. Musicians played acoustic guitars and improvised percussion on trash cans. A grandmother narrated local legends under a street lamp while a circle of listeners leaned in, rapt. Lucas himself painted a small companion piece at the corner of the wall, just a subtle one, depicting roots extending from hope in the shadows down into the ground, suggesting that its essence reached well beyond the surface. This collective display of culture and camaraderie caught the eye of a city council member who had been on the fence. Moved by the sincerity and passion, she approached Lucas, admitting that she hadn't fully understood what the mural meant to people. She promised to review the developer's proposal more critically. It was no guarantee, but it was a glimmer of hope. The local media covered the event, highlighting the diverse turnout and emphasizing that this wasn't just about saving one mural, it was about respecting the intangible heritage embedded in the city's walls. In the weeks that followed, negotiations dragged on. The developer, sensing resistance, tried to compromise. They offered to fund a new mural on a different building. The community balked. This wasn't about a new painting, it was about preserving a story that belonged exactly where it was. Under mounting pressure, the city's Cultural Preservation Board agreed to hold a special hearing. Residents, historians, architects, and artists testified, each from their unique perspective. Lucas spoke last, his voice trembling slightly as he explained that while art might be vulnerable and temporary, it often carried the weight of truth and memory. If we let this vanish without question, he said, we lose more than paint on a wall. We lose a piece of ourselves. A few days later, the board announced its decision. The building's facade, with the mural, would be granted provisional cultural protection. Any redevelopment would have to incorporate the mural or provide a meaningful alternative that satisfied the community. Stunned relief washed over Lucas and his allies. They'd done it, not halted change entirely, but ensured that the city's soul would be considered in the process. The developer, chastened, began seeking a creative solution, possibly incorporating the mural into a new courtyard design. Talks continued, but now on more equal footing. The victory was not absolute or final, but it was enough. Enough to reaffirm that when people united around something meaningful, they could steer the course of progress. Enough for Lucas to realize that the mural's worth wasn't measured in square footage or tourist appeal, but in the stories it carried and the bonds it strengthened. After the announcement, Lucas revisited the mural at twilight. The evening sky glowed softly above the old building. He ran his fingertips over the painted surface, feeling each ridge and indentation. Hope in the shadows had sparked his understanding that art could serve as a cornerstone of collective identity, a rallying point in moments of uncertainty. It had also tested his resilience, challenging him to stand up for what he believed in and showing him that obstacles could be overcome with creativity, dialogue, and courage. As he stepped back, a neighbor passed by, nodded, and said, "We did good, didn't we?" Lucas smiled. "Yes," he replied softly. "We did." The city would keep changing, he knew that. But for this moment, in this place, they had anchored an idea, that walls could speak for communities, and that people could speak back, shaping the future one brushstroke, one petition, one voice at a time. In the months that followed, the city's landscape continued its restless evolution, as did Lucas's role within it. He no longer saw himself as merely a street artist dodging crackdowns and painting in secret corners. Instead, he felt like a participant in an ongoing conversation, one in which his voice carried weight and influence. The resolution that saved Hope in the Shadows had set a precedent, demonstrating that the community could shape its urban narrative. And Lucas, who had once struggled quietly at dawn, now found himself contributing to public forums, advisory panels, and cultural initiatives. It started with a formal invitation from the local Cultural Preservation Board. They wanted his input on guidelines for integrating street art into new development projects. Lucas hesitated at first, feeling out of place in a room full of planners, architects, and city officials. But as he entered the City Hall conference room, he recognized the importance of this moment. He sat at a long table of polished wood, a sketchbook at his side like a talisman, and shared his experiences openly. He spoke about the balance between respect for property owners and the need to preserve meaningful artworks. He urged them to see murals not as decorative afterthoughts, but as living documents of community identity. Some officials listened with polite neutrality, others with genuine interest. One urban planner remarked that she'd never thought of murals as archives of emotion. Another suggested establishing a fund to support local artists and areas undergoing redevelopment, ensuring they wouldn't be pushed out by rising rents. These ideas coalesced into draft policies that aimed to foster a more inclusive approach to art in public spaces. Lucas, leaving the meeting, felt a cautious optimism. Perhaps these steps were small, but they affirmed that change could come from many directions: legislation, activism, artistry, and, combined, they might lead to a more compassionate city. Meanwhile, in his own practice, Lucas embraced bolder collaborations. He worked with Priya and her green initiatives, painting large planters and raised garden beds with intricate patterns of leaves and pollinators. He partnered with educators to develop workshops where students painted murals in their classrooms, blending academic lessons with artistic expression. Museums invited him to speak about the interplay of formal exhibitions and street-level creativity. He even joined forces with a local hip-hop collective, painting backdrops for their performances, where MCs freestyled about community struggles and hopes against the visual tapestry he'd created. The cumulative effect of these efforts was tangible. Many who once dismissed street art as mere vandalism began to view it through a more nuanced lens. They noticed how murals could bridge divides, how a clever piece of street art could highlight social issues more accessibly than political speeches or dry reports. As word spread, neighboring cities reached out to Lucas, asking him to participate in cultural exchanges. He visited Rio de Janeiro to consult on a community-driven art initiative and later traveled to a smaller town in the countryside to help young artists find their voice. Each journey taught him something new, reinforcing the idea that creativity was not confined by geography or status. It blossomed wherever it found fertile ground. Flavia and Lucas stayed close collaborators. They painted side by side on a public mural commissioned by a library, merging their distinct styles into a seamless narrative about literacy as liberation. As they worked, children stopped to watch, asking why they painted certain symbols or colors. Lucas answered patiently, explaining that each element carried meaning. An owl peering from a window represented wisdom, a stack of books morphing into birds represented knowledge taking flight. Flavia smiled, knowing that every conversation was a seed planted, a spark that might later ignite a child's curiosity or compassion. Sometimes Lucas revisited old haunts, places where his earliest murals had faded or been painted over. He felt no bitterness, impermanence was part of the craft. Instead, he saw these blank or altered walls as testaments to the city's restless pulse. What mattered was the ongoing cycle of creation, transformation, and renewal. He had learned that not every piece could be saved, and not every battle won, but each attempt enriched the collective story. The essence of his journey lay not in preserving static images forever, but in inspiring people to care enough to try. One evening, he accepted an invitation to speak at a community cultural center. The room was modest, illuminated by simple lamps, and the audience a motley mix of students, grandparents, activists, and fellow artists. Lucas spoke about resilience, the theme that had followed him from childhood sketches to clandestine murals and gallery exhibitions. He explained that resilience wasn't just about overcoming adversity, but about using creativity to reimagine what was possible. He talked about how, from his first timid attempts in dark alleys to standing in city hall chambers, he'd learned that art could give people the tools to see themselves differently. A young woman raised her hand and asked, "What do you hope your legacy will be?" The question startled him. He had rarely considered his legacy. After a thoughtful pause, he replied that he hoped his legacy wouldn't be tied to any single mural or policy change. Instead, he wanted his work to encourage others to believe that they, too, could shape their environment. "If a few of you," he said, voice steady, "see a blank wall not as an empty space, but as an invitation to tell a story or make someone feel less alone, then that's legacy enough." When the talk ended, people approached him with gratitude, sharing their own dreams, a teacher who wanted to start an after-school art club, a shopkeeper who planned to display local paintings, a grandmother who said she would tell her grandchildren about these murals so they'd grow up valuing beauty and justice. Their words filled Lucas with warmth. He realized that while he had started out just wanting to paint, he'd ended up contributing to a broader, more intricate tapestry of change. As the city's lights shimmered beneath a moonlit sky, Lucas wandered through streets that had once intimidated him. He remembered creeping through shadows to avoid the glare of patrol cars, saving scraps of paint and struggling alone. Now, he walked with quiet confidence, knowing he was part of something larger. He had seen how art could bring people together, not by erasing difficulties, but by acknowledging them, reflecting them, and inviting everyone to dream of better paths. He paused at the mural outside the gallery, Roots and Routes. Some leaves had begun to fade, and dust from passing buses clung to the lower sections. But the core image remained intact, its meaning still clear, roots anchoring into cracked sidewalks, blossoms pushing toward open sky. It was a story of resilience that carried on, much like Lucas himself, continually adapting and growing. He smiled softly, murmuring a quiet thanks to the city, its people, and the art that had connected them. With each step into the future, he knew that paint and passion, community and conversation would keep weaving through every challenge and triumph, leaving traces of hope wherever they touched. In the months that followed, life wove new patterns through Lucas's days. He continued painting, of course he did, and the city remained his endless canvas. But now, he moved through Sao Paulo's streets not only as an artist, but as a mentor, a collaborator, and a quiet advocate for all that art could mean in people's lives. His journey had stretched from secretive dawn escapades to open dialogues with educators, officials, and neighbors. He had learned that murals, so ephemeral and fragile, could leave roots in human hearts that endured long after paint began to peel. As word of his work spread, aspiring street artists sought him out. Some arrived at his door clutching portfolios of rough sketches, unsure how to navigate the city's sprawling tapestry of walls. Others introduced themselves at community gatherings, confessing their dreams of painting stories into public space, but fearing the same hurdles he once faced: legal troubles, financial instability, critical voices. Lucas listened to each in turn, sharing advice and encouragement. He offered what he lacked in his early years: guidance through the labyrinth of city policies, access to modest supplies, and most importantly, reassurance that their voices deserved to be heard. He formed an informal collective, not a formal organization, but a fluid circle of creators who met to exchange techniques, brainstorm themes, and support each other's projects. They painted collaboratively, blending distinct styles into cohesive narratives that told of local legends, environmental hopes, or the dignity of workers who rose at dawn to keep the city breathing. Sometimes their murals were grand and ambitious, other times intimate and understated. Regardless of scale, they bore the imprint of a shared ethos: that art belonged to everyone, and everyone had something worth expressing. The collective became a magnet for other art forms as well. Musicians tested riffs while the painters worked, dancers practiced steps in the margins of their gatherings, and poets scrawled impromptu verses on scrap paper, leaving them pinned to wooden posts for anyone to read. In this synergy, Lucas discovered a truth he had always suspected but never fully grasped: creativity was contagious. One person's bold experiment gave another the courage to try something new. A mural of a phoenix, wings outstretched, inspired a songwriter to compose lyrics about rebirth, which in turn prompted a dancer to choreograph movements of elegant resilience. The city pulsed with interwoven stories, each art form amplifying the others. Beyond his home neighborhood, Lucas traveled further, carrying a bag of brushes and a willingness to listen. Invited to a coastal town battered by storms and economic hardship, he worked with fishermen's families and local students to paint images of protective spirits guiding their boats. In a mountainous region struggling with landslides, he depicted sturdy trees and deep-rooted ferns embracing the hillsides, encouraging communities to reforest and preserve their ancestral lands. These journeys affirmed that the language of images and colors transcended differences in dialect, history, and circumstance. Wherever he went, the act of painting became a conversation about pain and joy, memory and future, failure and resilience. Now and then, he caught sight of subtle changes in policy and practice. It might be a small plaque near a mural, explaining its origins and meaning, or a workshop initiated by the city council, teaching property owners how to collaborate with artists rather than confront them. He saw invitations extended to street painters to participate in cultural festivals previously reserved for more traditional art forms. Perhaps these shifts were quiet and incremental, but each sign suggested that the friction between art and urban development had softened. The city was learning to value the voices once dismissed. Lucas did not claim credit for these changes. He knew many people had pushed for them over the years. But he felt proud that his journey, his persistence in painting hope where few expected it, had played a part. The story he helped write wasn't his alone. It belonged to everyone who joined him in believing that creativity could be a tool of healing, reflection, and community building. Back at home, in a space he'd managed to secure at a slightly better rent than before, he hung a small collection of personal mementos on the wall. Photographs of finished murals, newspaper clippings, a letter from a student who said the workshops changed how she saw the world. He kept these tokens not as trophies, but as reminders that his efforts had meaning. On difficult mornings, when a new project hit roadblocks or a client wavered on a promise, he glanced at these items and found the determination to continue. One afternoon, as he was reorganizing his materials, a knock came at the door. He opened it to find a teenage boy, hands trembling slightly, holding a rough sketch of a mural he hoped to paint in his school's courtyard. The boy looked nervous, explaining he had heard Lucas talk to students, that he cared about their voices. Lucas invited him in, offered him a cup of tea, and examined the sketch. It depicted a series of hands lifting each other up, set against a backdrop of swirling colors. The idea was simple yet powerful. Lucas smiled, remembering how he once stood in this boy's place, uncertain and hungry for guidance. They discussed technique, how to choose the right paints so the colors would hold under rain, how to outline the composition so that each hand looked distinct yet part of a whole. More importantly, they talked about what the mural meant. The boy explained that at his school, students came from many backgrounds and didn't always feel connected. He wanted to create something that said, "We're in this together." Lucas nodded. "That's exactly why street art matters," he said. "You're giving your school a mirror to see itself, a vision of what you hope it can be." In that moment, he saw the enduring inspiration he had become. Not a lofty icon, but a living example that anyone could paint their truth on the city's walls and find an audience willing to engage. He had become part of a lineage of artists who passed down their courage and craft to the next generation, each mural a chapter in a never-ending book of possibility. Late that night, after the boy left, Lucas stepped onto his balcony. The city stretched around him, streetlights glimmering like fireflies. Somewhere, a new artist might be painting their first hidden mural, heart-pounding in the darkness. Elsewhere, neighbors might be admiring a vibrant artwork that made them pause and rethink their world. And in countless minds and hearts, seeds of creativity took root. He inhaled deeply, savoring the air. His work would never be done. There would always be new walls to paint, fresh challenges to confront, and more voices to amplify. But that was the beauty of it, an unending journey toward understanding and connection. His legacy, if he had one, would live not just in painted images, but in the imaginations he helped awaken. A warm sense of gratitude settled over him. He had found his place in this grand, tangled city. He was one thread among many, weaving color and meaning into the urban fabric. And in that intricate tapestry, he hoped that generations to come would discover their own brushes and paints, their own words and songs, and continue the cycle of art and empathy that transformed streets into stories, and stories into a shared human dream.